Alright, so right here I have my go-to talent build. Aside from the PvP talents, I'll get into that right after, but for the universal talents, I'm also going to go into detail for each ability, just to see sometimes there's different options you want to choose, and also kind of give you my thought process for why I choose these ones right here for most scenarios. So let's start with the first row, level 15. We got Blind Fury. This is actually what I used to use. It's not bad overall, and it's pretty good for, you know, when you get that I-beam burst every 30 seconds. But FELBLADE is just a lot better. I noticed a lot of times you just can't catch up to your whoever you're trying to kill. Even if they're melee, sometimes you might need to, you know, get up in their face. This does decent damage as well. The magic damage, the fire damage helps, you know, it's not physical damage. And it comes up pretty often, especially with the reset, which I'll get into with the next talent row. Demonic Appetite is honestly just pretty useless, so I would never recommend that one. Next row, level 25 row, we have Insatiable Hunger. Demon Bites does more damage. This, I wouldn't really recommend. Yeah, I don't think it's really worthwhile to use this in any scenario. Burning Hatred. This one is also just not great for PvP. Demon Blades, this one is my go-to. So this actually also procs, so it replaces Demon's Bite, and basically when you auto-attack, you have a chance to do extra damage and get some Fury. This also does proc FELBLADE, so Demon Blades has a chance to reset the cooldown of FELBLADE, but since if you get this you don't have Demon's Bite, you can actually just get resets from auto-attacking, so it does still proc this, so it's a nice combo to have this. Plus you won't have to worry about spamming so many abilities if you're spamming your Demon's Bite, FELBLADE. This is very simple. As soon as you have FELBLADE up, you can just use it, and you can catch up to your opponent while doing some good damage. Demon Blades is very good just for consistent damage output and for Fury. The next row we have Trail of Ruin to start off. I actually used to run this, but I realized that it's not the best move. So it adds some consistent extra damage every time you do Blade Dance, but Unbound Chaos is just so much better because it gives you such a nice burst. So basically, try to use this in your burst combo, and also you should always use I-beam before you go in for your burst. And it lines up perfectly because I-beam is 30 seconds, and Immolation Aura is also, roughly 30 seconds. So basically every time, you can start with I-beam, get all that haste, do that damage, and then use Immolation Aura, and you also get that Fell Rush proc for Unbound Chaos, so it's a lot of extra damage there. Glaive Tempest, it also is a little bit of a nice burst, but it's over time, and also the Unbound Chaos just does more damage, and also it doesn't use any Furies, and it's just nice to have that instant burst as opposed to 3 seconds. So next we have Soul Rending, usually my go-to for, if they have a healer on their team, if I'm doing either 2s or most 3s. It gives you just nice leech all the time, so you're constantly healing. If you're versing like a rogue mage, I wouldn't really recommend this. I'd recommend Netherwalk in that case, because this is a nice solid defensive for just surviving insane bursts. So, if you see the mage up with Combust and you can't get away, or maybe even like you're versing a Boomkin and they Convoke, this will be a nice cooldown to save you for those scenarios. Desperate Instincts, I don't really use this, I wouldn't recommend this. It can come in handy, you can automatically trigger Blur when you get low. But a lot of times, like let's say a rogue has you in a kidney shot, if you trigger Blur, the main benefit is the dodge, but if you're stunned, you're not going to get the dodge, you're just going to get the damage reduction, so it's not really that effective. So I would recommend most cases, if you're versing a rogue, you might want to run Netherwalk anyway, Soul Rending in all other scenarios if you're not versing like a rogue mage. Next row we have Cycle of Hatred. I just really wouldn't recommend it. It's just not as good as the other ones. First Blood, this is really good because you want to keep up your Blade Dance at all times due to one of the PvP talents, which I'll get into soon. So essentially, if you're always using Blade Dance, this will give you nice extra damage, nice sustained damage. Essence Break, this could be good potentially, like let's say you have that legendary I have here, so Chaos Theory, when you get Chaotic Blades, when you use Blade Dance you have 30% chance to get it, then basically your Chaos Strike does a lot more damage and it has an additional chance to refund Fury. If you have that proc up and you also have Essence Break, you use that right after. Kind of hard to line everything up, and also, you know, if the enemy sees that you have your legendary proc up, they're probably going to run or use a defensive. Plus the first blood just gives a ton of consistent damage. That's like a good chunk right there, the 4k almost against the first target, because you're using Blade Dance every, like, what, 8 seconds? So that just honestly adds up to a little bit more. But I can see this potentially being used if you're able to line it up well. So maybe, yeah, play around with that one if you want to. This is a possibility, especially if you have that legendary, like I mentioned. Next row, Unleashed Power. That's kind of garbage, so Unleashed Power, that's not really that great. You know, Chaos Nova is a 1-minute cooldown, AoE stun. It lasts for 4 seconds in PvP. Chaos cost is 30, it's not terrible, but essentially your main stunning is going to be from Fel Eruption for, like, most scenarios. It only costs 10 Fury, and it'll stun them for 4 seconds on a 30-second cooldown, 20-yard range. So when you need a stun before you go in, let's say they're going to take all of that damage, unless they use a trinket or some kind of defensive, or the other guy CCs you. So it's really nice to have Fel Eruption. I used to run, actually, this one, Master of the Glaive, so Glaive Throw snares them. It can be good if, like, you just can't catch the enemy. It really helps if no one on your team has a slow, and you can just stick on them. But actually, since I started running FELBLADE, this lets you stick on your target really well. So you don't even need this. I would not recommend this at all. I would say Fel Eruption is the go-to. The last row we have Demonic. So I-Beam makes you go into demon form for 6 seconds after it finishes dealing damage. This one is huge because, like I said, every 30 seconds you want to do your rotation where you get essentially I-Beam, then you get your Immolation Aura, you get your Empowered Fel Rush, maybe even throw the Hunt in there, have them stunned if you want. So basically this will make it just so much stronger every 30 seconds. Momentum, this one is not that great, honestly. I would not recommend using this compared to Demonic. This will just give you so much more damage output. Fel Barrage is a cool one, you know, like looking at that 10k number is pretty nice, but it is a cast time for 3 seconds, so you can't really do anything else while you're doing this. And you're going to have so many other moves you're using in your burst rotation that you need to cast, so it won't really line up too well. And again, just Demonic gives you so much more overall DPS output, and it lines up perfectly with your small cooldowns. So I would recommend Demonic in every scenario. Alright, so let's get into the PvP talents. So this is usually my go-to here. I use Detainment, Mortal Dance, and Chaotic Imprint. But let me go into more detail about each one. A lot of people might argue that this one isn't best, but I think it really depends on the situation. So let's go through each one and kind of see what you want to use in each scenario. Let's start from the top. Cleansed by Flame. So this one, basically when you use Immolation Aura, you can get rid of all magical effects on you. This can be really good against maybe classes that have dots, like a Shadow Priest, you can get rid of a lot of their stuff, or an Affliction Lock, you can do the same. So maybe if you expect to have a rough time surviving against them, you could potentially use this one. Reverse Magic is very commonly used. Reverse Magic is actually much better than Cleansed by Flame. Every 1 minute you can essentially remove all magical effects from yourself and all nearby allies within 10 yards, and then send them back to the original caster if possible. So if that original caster, like the enemy, is also within that 10 yards, it'll be sent back to them. This is very useful for CCs like Polymorph. Let's say your healer gets polyed and you just want to be safe and not have to worry about, you know, them being CC'd forever or wasting their trinket. You can use Reverse Magic, and so it'll reverse it onto the enemy as well if they're nearby. Another thing could be, let's say, Freezing Trap on Hunters. I know they have up every, like, what, 25 or 30 seconds, so it's kind of tough to deal with because this is a 1 minute cooldown. But, you know, when your healer doesn't have Trinket up or is in a rough scenario, you know, maybe the enemy is going in with their damage cooldowns and you can't get away, you can run up to the healer, use Reverse Magic, and free them from that CC. So it's pretty useful in scenarios like that. One thing I would say, though, is that it seems very straightforward and easy to use, but honestly, it's not always very straightforward. Let's say you're playing twos, right? The enemy might CC you at the same time that they CC your teammate, so you might not be able to get up to them in time. Or let's say your person gets freezing trapped. If you're not in communications or not in Discord, let's say, then you might not be able to react as quickly. So it definitely helps when you are using this to be able to be in Discord or some other voice chat, or you can be ready to just help out your teammate, so they can kind of call it maybe ahead of time, like, oh yeah, this next poly or this next freezing trap, be ready to reverse magic. So that way you're kind of preemptively ready to go, and if you get CC'd, you can also let them know ahead of time. Demonic Origins reduce the cooldown of Metamorphosis. I guess that's cool, but you know, there are more important ones, so I wouldn't recommend it. Rain from Above. This actually got nerfed a lot. It used to do a ton of damage when you cast that Fell Lance spell, and you could cast that like every second on global, basically, when you're up in the air, but it doesn't do much damage anymore, and also there's more important talents. But I still would recommend this. Let's say you're versing I don't know, a lot of melees. Maybe the best example would be if you're in threes and you're versing 3 warriors. I know that's not going to happen, but in that scenario, it would make sense to run something like this because it could save you. So, you know, just consider oh, am I versing a lot of melees? They don't have ranged abilities. It might be a good defensive to have. And every minute, it's a pretty small cooldown. Detainment. I usually use this a lot because the targets become immune to damage and healing while imprisoned is really important. A lot of times your detainment can break. Let's say you're just swinging by with your Immolation aura up, or, you know, your teammate has AoE going. It'll break the imprison really early, but also this is nice because it increases the duration by 1 second. So it's just more reliable CC, and CC is really how you win most games. Line this up with your partner's CC. So I would recommend using this most games. And that's why I have it in my core choice of 3 there. Glimpse is actually really cool. So Vengeful Retreat will give you immunity to loss of control effects and reduce damage taken by 75% until you land. This can be really useful if, let's say, you're about to get CC'd, I don't know, maybe you're about to eat a Cyclone and you can't interrupt them or line of sight them. You can always use Vengeful Retreat to dodge that loss of control effect. Or maybe even let's say they're casting a big spell like Chaos Bolt, but you can't get away or interrupt it or anything. You can use that to take 75% less damage. So it kind of has different scenarios you can use it in. Cover of Darkness, I don't think that extra 4 yards will really make the difference. They'll probably be able to make it regardless, but increasing the duration by 2 seconds is kind of helpful. But I think there's better defensive options. Glimpse would probably be a better defensive option in most scenarios, or Reverse Magic. Unending Hatred gives you some fury when you take damage. It doesn't really give you too much. I wish it kind of gave you more stats on how much it gives you, but I wouldn't really recommend this. It's not too necessary, and there are better options to choose from. Blood Moon. Consume Magic affects all enemies within 8 yards and grants 5% leech for 5 seconds. This could be good in 3s. You know, you are kind of using your Consume Magic pretty often to get rid of buffs, get rid of hots, get rid of, you know, beneficial magic effects on the enemy. Isolated Prey. I wouldn't recommend this in most scenarios because usually you get extra value when you hit both people, but also they might have pets or just something that gets in the way and it doesn't even proc. So it could be useful to use this. It kind of really depends on the specific comp and scenario. And now, Chaotic Imprint. So it could be fire damage, it could be different type of damage that Demon Hunters have available to them. But the thing is that magic damage also works for chaos damage, and I've tested that. So it works for your Eye Beam. Demon Hunters just have a lot of chaos damage. So as I mentioned in the earlier talent segment, you have a really strong burst every 30 seconds. So use Immolation Aura, Glaive Throw, then go in with the Eye Beam. You might want to stun them before Eye Beam or after, depending on the scenario. Then you can go in with the Hunt if you'd like to, and then you can dash into them with Fell Rush with that Unbound Chaos for insane damage. That chaos damage is also being improved by the Chaotic Imprint. And then if you end up you know, maybe going through them too far, or you know, you need to get back to them, you already have your FELBLADE, so that'll make you get right back on top of them and continue your burst, so you're not you know Fell Rush away from them essentially. So that's a really big burst you can do essentially every 30 seconds, minus the Hunt, which, you know, is a 1.5 minute cooldown. So Mortal Dance is the last PvP talent. Blade Dance reduces the target's healing received by 25% for 5 seconds. Since Blade Dance is a common move you're going to be using as a big part of your rotation off cooldown, you want to use this every time pretty much, and that actually also goes down with haste. Every time you use it, you're going to reduce their healing. It's really important to have that healing reduction. Would recommend that every single time. And yeah, so I'd recommend, again, have Detainment pretty much every time, Mortal Dance pretty much every time, and the third one is pretty situational. Reverse Magic pretty often, especially if you're in voice chat.